I wanted to say that this one particular panel, I'm going to give it a trigger warning because I've asked these women to share their stories, to hold nothing back. I've told them to even talk over each other if they have if something comes up. So I hope it's a raucous and informative and shake you up kind of panel about women and writing, what women face. And Judy Blunt, I selected Judy Blunt to be the instigator, the provocateur, because with her novel, not novel, with her memoir, Breaking Clean, she endured a lot of changes in her life, and a very powerful woman. So without further ado, here's Judy Blunt.
Woohoo! It's about time, right? Okay, so I am of a different generation than most everyone up here, not so much by age, but by experience. I grew up in eastern Montana, about 30 years behind the rest of the world. And when I grew up, even in my very early days of writing, even when I was still on the ranch, kind of trying to feel my way out into storytelling, writing was frivolous for women. If you wanted a hobby that was productive, you did needlework or you cooked or you gardened, pulled calves, whatever. But writing was frivolous and self-indulgent. And I joined the University of Montana in 1986 in journalism, because I thought, well, that's more practical, that you got a degree with a job at the end. Then I discovered how much the job paid. And I had 3 kids. I was a single parent. I was working construction. And I went on tour with a book of poems. Get over it, right? In Montana, Merriam Frontier book. Not Quite Stone was the name. My children immediately changed that to Not Quite Stoned, only because they knew it got my goat. But I was on tour with David Cates and Pete Fromm, right? And I was, I'm sure they were expecting somebody in a veil and, the poetic whatever, and I showed up in my cowboy boots and my leather jacket, spitting between my teeth, and they were pacified by that. But in listening to their stories, I quickly discovered how different it was for a guy of that generation, of that era, in that time, to be a writer. They were, stay-at-home fathers. Their wives were out working jobs, with insurance and all that hoopla. And they were paying for babysitters or daycare between this hour and that hour while they wrote, because it was a job, it was a career. They're trained to think of careers. I never knew a woman writer of my age who would pay for daycare to write. They wrote while their baby slept. They wrote with a baby on the breast, on one-handed. They wrote rocking a cradle or a bouncy whatever with one foot. But they did not credit or value their writing. Almost instinctively, they didn't. It gave me a valuable lesson in how, you looked around the bookstore, why are there so many more male authors? And it's like, well, because they're effing home writing, or they're somewhere writing. And the women were putting that behind all of the other jobs of making a home, of raising children, of being partners, of being, our lives were defined for us pretty much at birth. It took a lot of courage to undo that. These women, many of them, started at a very different stage in what I consider this evolution. It did have a downside, by the way. Pete and David were both on tour with me when we'd be on the High Line. All these old farmers would be running off the damn hay fields in the middle of haying to listen to this artsy event. And at the end of it, they'd be asking questions, and they'd say, so what do you do for a living? And, you know, Pete and Dave would go, well, I write. No, I mean, what do you do for a living? They couldn't quite get the idea that writing was a living, was work. They talked to me, what do you do for a living? I sand and finish hardwood floors. That's our girl. That's our girl. That we get. That we get. So I got my, you know, pats on the back that way. So anyway, I'm hoping that in the decades since I began my journey, that women have begun to give themselves permission to write, permission to have careers, permission to think of themselves as important enough to share, as Sarah talked about earlier, marrying people that instinctively have been raised to understand partnership and how that works nowadays. And that if both people are working, that means both people are parenting. And that is something that I sadly missed. But anyway, I have great hope for time moving forward.
Should I crush that?
Why don't you?
I guess I can.
I would ask everybody to introduce yourself briefly by name so that they're no longer scrolling the hoorah over our heads.
Sure. I'm Jenny Sheets, and if you heard, I own a Story Squares app, a writing app for children. I'm in the MFA program here. Should I wait on my story? Tell my story?
Go for it.
Okay, so I just feel like I have to then immediately crush this. So I started writing seriously writing for publication maybe 4 or 5 years ago and decided to jump right in. So I would say the biggest change is that I do have full support from my husband, which is awesome. Every few years he does kind of ask, so you maybe getting a job? Maybe? No, it's okay if you don't want to, but maybe this year. But other than that, he's been good. But the biggest thing I noticed was in the publishing world. I don't know if you guys have seen this. I don't think I've ever noticed my gender more. I am really good at networking, said that before, so I would always ask editors, publishers, just anyone, can I take you out for a beer and can I ask you some questions? They loved to mansplain to me and tell me about the industry. So I got into this magazine and started just writing whatever they wanted. And pretty soon, so I get this story, a pitch for, it was a sports magazine, and for female clothing. And I thought, well, okay, fine, I can write that. Why is it a certain way? So I start writing it, and then I get an email from this woman in the office that I didn't even know she worked there, and she says, well, why don't we change the piece to the perception of female athletes? I thought, well, that's way cooler, okay. So I dive into this story about women in sports and the way they're perceived, and Olympian athletes, and going back to the first woman ever to run the Boston Marathon who got physically assaulted by men trying to pull her off the course. So I write this piece, and I'm so stoked on it, and I find out it's going to be printed in a section of the magazine called Just for Chicks. Yeah, okay, it's just starting. So I email the editor and publisher, whom I have a relationship with, and just say, okay, this is bullshit. I think this is an issue for everyone. It should not be in 2 pages of your magazine, marginalized. This is a serious issue, and I kind of hinted I didn't want to have too much control. I was still just the new little girl at the magazine, but just kind of saying, I don't really want to give you this article that's going to be in this section. He wrote back, starting, easy, Tiger. This sounds more like the diatribe of an angry feminist than a well-thought-out argument. Gave me 4 paragraphs of why I was wrong, why women do want 2 pages in a magazine that are just for girls, and that I should get used to it. This is the way the industry worked. And that, quote, next time you have an opinion, open your eyes before your mouth. So, thanks to the coaching of my wonderful angry feminist friends, I wrote back, thank you for your response, Jenny. That was it. Just hold it in. They did a rally cry. They sent in people sending in letters, calling, and as of that issue, I haven't read it since, but that one, it got published, and the Just for Chicks section was gone. So that was girls getting together. And so it hasn't changed, and he never spoke to me again. So that was uplifting, if anybody else wants to. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jenny Montgomery, and I'm a poet, and I've been a journalist and written nonfiction essays, and I've been writing since my teens. But I guess you could say I'm in the second phase of my writing life as a mother and a person running a business, and it's very different from the first phase of my writing life. Similar to Sarah, when I was in my 20s, I lived in New York, and I worked on a little magazine, and I was single and free and did whatever I wanted. And so, yeah, I don't know exactly what, do you have a question, Judy? Or there's so many things to say about this topic.
Do you perceive any sort of gendered issues in the way
Oh,
that
yeah.
you have approached writing?
Yes, absolutely. So I think the biggest revelation for me has been, as someone who grew up in the 70s around, I wore a little T-shirt that said "Women's Lib," and so this was, I grew up in this, and my mom was getting a job, and I was a latchkey kid, and everyone told me I could be an astronaut. And I went to the Evergreen State College, and where I became a Marxist feminist, and I had a very good intellectual understanding of the material reasons why women did not have a substantial literary history. But I think it took me a longer time to sort out how complicated cultural influences resulted in, I wouldn't say internalized misogyny or internalized tendencies to underplay my work. And this really hit home for me a couple of years ago when an ex of mine from my New York days won a major international book award. And I was really proud of him and also incredibly devastated because I had to look carefully at the ways in which, someone that I saw go from, a pretty impressive slam poet to a completely realized artist, differed from my estimation of what I could do and how I could do it. And so, yeah, I think over the past 5 years especially, I've really been forcing myself to take my work seriously, and also joining with other women, and similar to Sarah, having an accountability partner. I work with another woman, and we speak every week and say, okay, what did you do? Did you send that out? Why didn't you send it out? How many times has it been rejected? Send it out again. You have a Twitter account. Why didn't you put that up? And so, yeah.
Do you have a concept of some topics being chick topics, like Jennifer's talking about, or demeaning, writing about children, writing about motherhood, writing about
yeah.
the sort of traditional women's role in society, which is, sort of rediscovered in its own right at this point. Cooking, all the sorts of skills that were sort of demeaned as the housewife are now kind of being rediscovered as, I don't know, life skills. Everybody likes clean sheets and a good meal sort of thing, and clean clothes. And so they're beginning to rediscover and perhaps reinterpret the value of those roles. Did you have any early experience in having particular topics dismissed as not worthy?
Yeah, for sure. I've taken a lot of criticism from male writers over the years, but also I have to say some of my best mentors and champions have been male writers, and one of them's in the room, Chris Dombrowski, who helped me a great deal with a chapbook entirely about the experience of motherhood, and he was very willing to say this is part of a universal experience of parenting, and it also crosses into areas that you may not understand if you're not a woman, but we need this. Yeah. So that's been tremendous. But yeah, it is a little scary to send out a packet of 5 poems about raising children. And but it's great when they get accepted. Yeah.
My name is Gabriella Gutierrez Muhs, and I'm a professor of Women and Gender Studies and Modern Languages at Seattle University. I've been there for 18 years. And in terms of gender and intersectionality, my career, it was not something I chose. It's something that when I arrived in the academy, after getting my PhD, I ended up in an all-male modern language department. And so I saw all these voids for what my colleagues and I needed in terms of academic women building and academic wound naming, what was going on with micro and macroaggressions with women in the academy. So I carried the book Presumed Incompetent on my back for 8 years. It was published in 2012, end of 2012, 2013, and it has sold like hotcakes. And we're just doing a second volume of that. We launched that hoping that there would be no submissions, no abstracts, because I really wish that we were post this, but we are not. There were hundreds, more than 130 submissions in a month, I think. So we're still, do I see a difference in the way that women in the academy are treated? Yes, absolutely. Do I see, by all of us, because we are, you know, basically the structure is there. I would definitely see that my male colleagues that started working with me, everybody would run to help them when they had an event, but nobody would help me. I also particularly see a difference. I wrote a poem that was just published. I brought the book and an article. This is a great book if you're interested in Journeys of Social Justice. Have an article in here. And the name of the poem is Social Class Captives. And in my book, Presumed Incompetent, that I edited, it's more than 44 women participated with their essays. There's one by Connie Anthony, who's a working class white woman, who wrote about how you can say that you're proud and you're brown, but you cannot say that you grew up poor and you're proud, right? No one wears a t-shirt of poor and proud. So she talks about how people are othered in the academy if they come from the working class. So I particularly pay attention to all women that come from the working class, men of course also, because it is a different experience in the academy. So much more to say, but I'll begin with that.
I don't know a single woman writer who believes she has permission to be writing. And look at how polite we all are here. Like Deborah said, I want this to be like you all talk over each other and stuff, and we're just sitting here going 1, 2, 3, 4 in order because we're socialized to be nice and to be polite and to make way for other people, and those things are death to writing. And you sit down. Every student I have who's a woman does not know that she has permission to tell her story. She knows she has permission to write stuff down and not offend people, but the weight that she carries about offending people, whether it's her family, her partner, her children, her publisher, her editor, is crippling. And I think all the time about how to shake women out of this. I haven't figured it out yet, and if any of you have figured it out, I would love to know. And maybe you're right that this is generational, and maybe women who are younger than me aren't struggling with this. But I think that that's the, you know, we understand that part of our role in the world is to be compassionate and to be attentive to others and to be attuned to others. And we don't understand how to turn that inside toward ourselves in order to give ourselves that for our writing. And I will take care of almost anyone else in my family. No, not almost. I will take care of everyone else in my family, animals included, before I will take care of my writing. And granted, I often use that so as not to go to my writing, but it's no one's complaining about it. No one ever says, hey, you're not supposed to be here. You know, you need to go back and shut the door and sit down. Yeah, that's one of the troubles, I think, about being, I mean, as long as we're going to talk about what it is to be women writers instead of just writers,
Right.
I think that's the problem.
I almost interrupted you, but I was too polite.
You were too polite, I know.
Anybody who knows me knows that's a damn lie. I'm actually kind of fascinated by that, too, because I don't know how much of this has to do with individual cases of how we're raised. How we're raised to think of our, I was never asked once in my life what I wanted to be. It was assumed that I would marry, with any luck, a rancher with some land, and I would have children and I would cook casseroles. It was assumed, by me too. And so when I broke free of that, I almost didn't have a template to follow. And I guess my original question for the crowd is that, is there a new template under construction out there? Because I know these things take a long time. You have children, there's a time to write, there's a time to have a baby. It's a physical, emotional, spiritual thing that occurs to us as females of the species that, you know, you can't expect yourself to get up off the birth bed and go write a short story. It just, you've got to give yourself also permission at times to step back from one career to attend to another. And we, almost all of us, are multitaskers. We are involved in many areas of life. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that makes us interesting and well-rounded and powerful. But giving ourselves permission to step back from one area that is socially acceptable and very much desired. I mean, the ranch crew loved that I had a hobby of cooking, for instance, not so much on the writing, but the cooking, that was awesome. So, you know, the path of least resistance was my path for a long time. I just feel kind of empowered by the students I have now who are saying no, you know, they're marrying people who understand that if both people are working, both people are parenting, both people are cleaning the toilet. And the husband is no longer doing you a favor if he cleans the fridge. He knows the fridge needs cleaning. It's this shared responsibility of life that's always gone throughout the 70s one direction, where if you wanted to do it all, knock yourself out. But nobody was coming back across the line, especially to take on more work. And so there was a lot in the 70s of women. If you wanted to take on more responsibility, that was your lot. But there weren't so many men willing to step up and say, you know, I really feel like, I don't know, shampooing the carpets tonight. That wasn't happening a lot. So anyway, Sarah.
I think we have made progress when it comes to having more feminist men hanging around to marry, and when it comes to shared partnerships. I think we haven't made as much progress when it comes to recognizing the importance of female narratives and female storytelling. I think one of the biggest things that I run into as a female writer and comedian is just not being heard by the male public when I speak or write. One of the things when I started doing stand-up that was pretty obvious right away is that I was almost always the only female comedian performing. And I often wondered, why, where is everyone? And the answer has been pretty complex. I started a workshop for female humor writers and comedians that meets once a month now to try to get more people up on stage. And when I talk to these women, and women will come up to me after shows and they always say the same thing, which is, "You're so brave," which is a weird, bad thing that I don't like to hear. Men are never told that they're brave for getting up and telling
And
penis
men will
jokes.
not tell you that you're brave either. They don't think in.
No.
No.
No, they ask, when can I go up? But what I started learning when I talked to women who wanted to get up on stage and tell their stories is that women don't know, they've never heard their stories be told on stage. They hear male comedy all the time, and they don't even know what female comedy sounds like. And the other half of the problem is that I just read this interesting article called The Male Glance. It's in this issue of the Virginia Quarterly Review. And it's about how female stories are just ignored by men a lot of the time, or dismissed as genre, or dismissed as, oh, it's a chick flick, or this is about parenting, like it's not serious. But part of this article talked about how funny females are often misinterpreted by males as being spacey or cruel or bitches, because they literally can't comprehend what a funny woman sounds like. They don't know what a female joke sounds like. I think that's where the work needs to be done next.
My name is Heather Cahoon, and I'm a poet, but I'm also a policy analyst, and so most of the writing that I do on a regular basis is very critical analyses, lots of data, state tribal policy mostly. And I feel very fortunate that I have a very different experience of writing and feeling like I always had permission to write. And I think that it might have something to do with being raised primarily by my father. And he always encouraged us to be courageous and daring and, competent, and just was very supportive of the fact that ever since I can remember, I was writing poetry. And always received validation from him, and just expected that that was something I could do if I felt like it. So I'm very appreciative of having that support, from the beginning.
I think writing from communities of color, our families, our communities, I've always felt as a Chicana, Mexican American, that people were very proud of me. And like you, my mother was always encouraging. She used to ask me at first, when are you going to get paid? So the first few checks that I got for $60, or I remember Adrian Rich paid me $125, and that was a lot. Woo. And I gave to her because I wanted her to know that you also get paid for writing.
But you gave away what, I understand the gesture, which is lovely, and connecting to your mother, but you also, why did you give away your payment?
I wanted to. My mother, my parents grew up, I grew up in the fields. My parents were farm workers. And so I wanted to share my riches. I was very happy to give her what I made. I didn't need anything, and I wanted to gift her with that. I think it's very different when, if you're from middle class or upper class and your parents have enough, but my mother didn't have enough. I supported my mother in my 20s and 30s when she went to school to learn English. So I was happy. It was wonderful to gift her. Yeah.
How do you see, and starting from the end and working our way back around, how do you see yourselves as model for young girls? Anywhere, of course, in Sarah's case, she's got a couple floating around home. But how do you see yourself as a model in your communities, in your lives? for young girls coming up? How do you present yourself as a model to young girls who might be looking toward you?
You should have asked me last. I could have developed a really great response. Because I feel like that I don't interact with young girls very much. I interact with a lot of adults, a lot of policymakers.
But are you visible in your community?
You know, I feel like I'm more behind the scenes, behind the computer.
I'm
in
all
that
for
capacity.
visibility. I'm all for just like being brash and out there so that young people can say, oh, wait, there's one. You know, there's somebody that I might be someday.
Oh, can I skip out of line here, Judy?
Yes,
You don't have to
So-
ask for permission.
ask permission.
So, yeah, I guess I never felt that I didn't have permission to write. I think one reason is that I come from a family of creative people, and my dad's a jazz musician, and you know, I was just expected that I would have some type of creative production, you know, that was always going on in the house. But someone who also gave me permission was my grandmother, who was an outrageous person. And I think she was an alcoholic, and she was incredibly funny, and she would take me with her shoplifting in downtown Portland. And I feel like, you know, there's this kind of person in my life who was transgressive, and yet most of us cannot look back very many generations to find women who worked, women who supported themselves, women who were educated, women who, you know, had the kind of life that supported artistic production. Mm-hmm. And so that has an impact. To be the first one,
Yeah.
right? To be the very first one, even if you had people who were powerful or supported you, the fact that there isn't anyone in the line behind you, and that eventually it gets back, you know, in my case, to farmers and people in agriculture and women who had 12 children and no education. So,
Well, people often ask me what actually, I mean, 8 straight years of university to undergraduate and a graduate degree with 3 kids and, you know, humping floor equipment. And part of it came from the lack of support. I had nowhere to go home to. I had left everything I understood as real life, and if I fell backward, my head was on the cement. There was nothing to go back to. That creates almost a panic of, you know, sort of perfectionism where you just drive yourself and drive yourself. I don't think that's healthy, but I'm saying, you know, it's a way of my generation to get out of that first generation stomp on their heads if they are getting ahead of their raising, as my mother would have said. I got ahead of my raising fairly early on in life. I did.
Well, while your version may be more extreme, I think there is definitely a shifting tide that we and everyone in this room is becoming the new role models for these young girls, and that's exciting that, you know, maybe just 1 or 2 generations before us, maybe 0 before some, this is such a changing time and a really exciting time, and I think that it's our responsibility to be the role models now, even if you're behind the scenes. You know, they're watching you now.
But something I've also noticed, and this is because it's also about gender, that as I always tell the Jesuits, I work at a Jesuit university, it's not just the young women that come to me, it's the young working class men.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's becoming an issue of social class. And that's how our role models are. People might not even know me, but they will come and talk to me about their parents' divorce. If they need $1 for the bus, they don't go to the white counterpart, you know, next door. I wish they would, but no, they come to me. So I see that shift also, that people are really going to their role models depending on how they grew up and their experience and their social class, or whether you identify with a lot of the LGBTQ students will come to me because they know that I will be there for them.
Right.
So it's about you know, social justice and other issues.
Absolutely. Getting more representation in these roles of being a role model in
Well,
society.
and as parents, as people who choose to have children in this world, which is, my God, gets more courageous every day, I learned early on that it was far easier for me to teach my daughter to take power than it was to teach my sons to give it up. They were 6'4" handsome devils. They were born with a certain amount of privilege, even though we were not, we were poor. But they assumed a certain amount of, power in the world just by being there. And it's very difficult to get them to understand what that means, especially when they're first stepping into the size of their bodies and all of that. And so as parents, how do you teach girls? How do you teach boys? I mean, how do you model for them ways that lead them forward into a new, decade of perhaps progress?
I think, I would, when I have the good fortune to be around young girls, which isn't that often, and I have 2 sons, the thing I want them to feel is that not only are they seen, but what they are experiencing is real, not just valued, but real. And one of the things that's emerged since October with the Me Too movement has been women being able to say, I thought I was crazy and I didn't know how to hold this experience, but it really happened to me, and other people saying, yes, it was real. And I would urge girls to keep speaking, which we know they stop doing as they get into high school. And I don't know if it's still happening. I think it is, partly because of the entitled boys who are enjoying their privilege and their place. And why not? And with boys, with my sons, it's really hard to get them to notice that they are making assumptions about other people's experience, and I haven't cracked that one yet. But I'm still working on it, even though they're leaving. They're gone, but I'm still working on them.
I think about that study that you mentioned a lot, which is that girls step out of the spotlight around when they hit puberty, and they just stop speaking up. It's also, not to bring all of this back to comedy, but the time when girls stop being funny. They've actually studied this. Girls are afraid to make jokes starting when they're about 13 or 14 years old. And as I raise my 2 little girls who are super funny, one of the things I think about most is how to preserve that confidence in them. The coffee mug that says, give me the confidence of a mediocre white man. That's all I want for my little girls.
Maybe not all, but
That's the thing I want most for them. But, we were, me, Kima Waterfield, and Becky Marjolas, who are all writers and comedians in town, were being interviewed by a male reporter recently. And he asked Becky, how are you feminist in your performance? Like, what's feminist about what you write and how you perform? And I wish I had said this because it's awesome. She said, stepping onto stage is an act of feminism. And every time I get up there, it's feminist. And it doesn't matter what I'm talking about because it's a female story. And I think that's what I want to show my girls the most, is that every time that I step out into the public, being up here is feminist. Like, I'm showing them.
And I think anytime a woman steps on the stage or sits on a panel without apologizing for it, it's feminist. And I would love to see a day when women can be in grocery stores without apologizing for being in the way when someone else wants to walk past them. It's stopping apologizing. If you can get your girls not to apologize for being.
Right. And I also want to make the point that I think we often want to give our daughters more masculine traits like confidence and strength and the ability to speak out, to be funny. The other half of the puzzle is teaching our boys to be feminine.
Absolutely.
And I think that's overlooked a lot.
I think, we discovered that in the 70s, that was about the time that business attire for women took on the pinstripe suit and ties, and everything was modeled after powerful men, including a lot of behavior, which might work in the boardroom, but all that does is you're going kind of over to the dark side a little bit.
Yes.
So much better for our world in general if people came back the other direction and listened. What we've done here today is not interrupt out of whatever. We're listening to one another, and that's something that should be modeled around the world right now. I think we invented it, sort of, I mean, moms-
Did you see that ad recently that was something, I don't know if it was Bic pens, but it was think like a man, act like a woman. Did you see that? It was just, and there was thankfully huge like pushback on it because it was just like, why put us into this mold of something that we're not? A smart brain is a smart brain, but I'm not going to try to act like a man to get the attention and to get the promotion. And, we should be respected and building these girls up to be who they are.
Well, you were talking earlier about academia, and that is a brand new, that is a generational shift in the paradigm oftentimes. These old school guys, predictably, sort of grandfather out, and new ones come in. But I remember when I first got to the University of Montana, Lois Welsh was the only female professor, and she had a dress code. She had to wear skirts. The men all smoked in their offices. She was not allowed to smoke. So there was a very gender biased thing in place in a liberal arts institution. So I guess, the way I sleep at night is to think that there has been some progress.
Absolutely. We're not there anymore,
Yeah.
hopefully. I wanted
Not
to-
everywhere, anyway.
Yeah. I wanted to go back to what you do. I have two sons, 19 and 22, and I think it's about the modeling. But I also, when I was in my 20s and I thought I wasn't going to have children at all, this is the model I would promote, because I think we need to have a paradigm shift where we only take care of our own children. So I am fortunate because I run across all these young women that I can mentor and publish and support and promote, and role model to, right, and take to conferences with me. But the model that I would like is my model, of course, that in my 20s, I decided that because I really didn't plan to have children or get married, I was going to take on 5 women in my life, 5 young women that I was going to mentor for the rest of their lives. And these were young girls that were, poor. They were from the working class. Their parents worked in canneries in the Central Coast in California. And up to now, every one of them has received their BA, at least, if not a master's in social work. So I think it can also be an active, decision that you say, this is where I'm going to put my money, which is where I've put my money. Not only my 2 sons, but these 5 women that I've mentored and supported throughout their careers for whatever they wanted to become.
Right. Absolutely. I think we can't also dismiss the absolute importance of fathering, and both in what young women come to expect of a partner and behavior that they deem normal, but also for boys and how you treat a partner and how you get around in the world without becoming, a stereotype. So it isn't all women, but I believe that a lot of, good things are in our hands right now. I think it's possible. It seems hopeful. Anyway, we are out of time unless somebody has a 4-second question.
Hey.
4 seconds, okay. Speaking to permission to offend people, one of my most liberating moments is when I actually lost my reputation. And I'm wondering if any of you have had that experience, not as a big finger to society, but as reaching a line and deciding to cross it into a fire, watch people leave you, but also watch people come to you.
How many times?
I think really fast that the story that I told about the magazine, he told me that he wouldn't get me published and would tell everyone else not to publish me. And I stayed strong, and I just said, I'm done with this magazine, and this is, I'm going to stand by my belief. And it was really hard because I was just starting out, and I was young, and I had this low self-confidence as a woman in this industry. So to hear somebody say that they're going to crush your career was just like, whoa, like, okay, I'm taking a risk, but fuck you. Like, all right.
My reputation was never established. It was always a little iffy. So the loss of it, yeah. We all do things, I think, at times that are, some voice tells us to step forward and just keep walking. I've done that about 4 or 5 times in my life, and on very difficult circumstances where I came out of a fire and into another one and just kept walking. And, you've got to have the courage of your convictions. You've also got to have a circle of people who understand you or understand something about you, who can reach out a hand and say, we all do this. Those of us who get ahead walk through those fires. So congratulations. Yeah. Woohoo.
Good job.
I have 1 minute.
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to finish with a poem. The Unimagined Life. Let us tread through the mud, step on the cow pies on the road, alert butterflies of upcoming thunderstorms, while awareness fills our wings, perception weaves its halo our direction. We were told to learn, and learn we did, manufactured ourselves a house unlike those of the 3 pigs. They didn't serve our indomitable minds, sequestered bodies, a society chained with milk bottles, we unfettered souls. By building the unimagined lives, imagine the livable receptacle of our wordless liberation, without prescribed actions or directions, without condemnations or benedictions, without words that alert cultural knives to cut our illusions in half. The unfettered vision reigns. We grow hope like strawberries.
Thank you for coming out, and we will see you in another venue soon.